Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Justin Collins, and I make up one half of the dynamic duo from a little podcast you guys might know as Across the Aisle. My good buddy Chaz Case isn't with me right now. This isn't something I had planned or scheduled, and we hadn't really talked about this, but I'm on my way home right now, and I've got some more thoughts about our topic of discussion for the last episode. The Capitol riots, Trump and his rhetoric, what have you. And I've had some time to marinate on it, and I've got so much more I want to say on the subject than I was really able to in that episode. I blame Chaz's baby, but I'll deal with that on another time. So I've been seeing a lot lately, especially in the form of memes, but also just general people's opinions about how if this were a Black Lives Matter riot that happened at the Capitol and not, QAnon, MAGA, whatever you want to call it, that it would have been very different. And the implication is that it would have essentially been a mass murder of Black Lives Matter protests, I believe is what they're trying to say. And that might be a little personified, but bear with me. So I, believe it or not, as the conservative voice on this show, I agree. I think it would be very different if this were a Black Lives Matter protest as opposed to a QAnon, MAGA, Trump supporter, again, whatever. I believe it would be very different. And I believe it would be different because, as so many of us have apparently already forgotten, just a few short months ago, we had Black Lives Matter protests in DC, in Chicago, in Atlanta, in New York, in California, in Georgia, all over the place. Wisconsin, all over the place. And God help me, I can't think of one instance where a major media platform, other than maybe Fox, but I don't even think I've actually heard it on Fox, but for the sake of argument, let's say they said it, that deemed those people in those riots terrorists or treasonous or un-American. In fact, as I recall, I remember seeing buildings on fire with a little chyron in front of it saying fiery, but mostly peaceful protest takes place in Georgia today. I saw police officers in dance lines with Black Lives Matter protesters. I've seen police officers taking knees for Black Lives Matter protesters. I've seen white people on their knees with their hands in the air chanting whatever the fuck they were told to chant by a Black Lives Matter protester. I saw multi-billion-dollar corporations tell me I need to put a black square on my Instagram so I show my solidarity. I saw Amazon, Netflix, Hulu point out, hey, all these movies have black people in them, you should watch them. I saw people like Chris Cuomo saying, tell me where protests are supposed to be peaceful. And the list goes on and on and on. But for you to tell me after seeing that for 6 months that it would be so vastly different because the protesters at the White House would have been, treated less fairly or with more brutality, or there would have been more security. First of all, I agree. I don't know why the hell there wasn't enough security at the White House or at the Capitol building in this incident. I heard something about Muriel Bowser turned down the offer to have Homeland Security or the National Guard or whatever come in. But again, I don't know. But on the other hand of that thought, I've seen the picture. This was the Capitol building or the White House during Black Lives Matter protests, and this is the one then. What do you think the difference is? The difference is the Black Lives Matter protesters burned down a church across the street from the White House just prior to that. Now, so far as I know, up until shit got dirty and rough at the Capitol building a couple days ago, there were no fires, there were no gunshots, there were nothing. But you want to tell me that it would be vastly different, it would be much, much worse and much more violent if these were Black Lives Matter protesters. Joe Biden even came out and said as much, which, on another note, really pisses me off, because when he came out after, essentially winning the election, we later found out he actually did, but when the the media deemed him the winner, and he came out and said, now is a time for unity. Now is a time to heal. Now is a time to bring America back together to some sort of sense of normalcy. And this motherfucker comes out not 2 nights ago and says, we all know it would be much, much worse if these were Black Lives Matter protesters. And that's ridiculous. And so Mr. Peace and Unity goes out of his way at a time where, I honest to God, I don't know one person personally. Now, obviously there are people. I don't know one person personally who said, thank God those people stormed the Capitol building. They really got it done. It was a bunch of people dressed up in costumes taking funny pictures, for the most part. There were some casualties, obviously, mostly police injuries. But still, for Joe Biden to come out and say that, how exactly does that unify the country? Unless, as I suspected in the very beginning, your idea of unity is not, you believe what you believe, I believe what I believe, but we're all still Americans. That idea of unity is, do you see what we're talking about now? Are you with us? And it was just so fucking sick to my stomach about it. Because this was a moment, barring 9/11, that was the darkest moment in our nation's history, in my lifetime. We had people storm the Capitol building while Congress was in session. And there was violence, and there was death, and there was destruction, and all of that. But what really grinds my gears is all the people who are coming out saying, oh, well, looks like y'all white people are cool with these protests, but you weren't cool with those protests. I'm not cool with any of the protests, and I've been very clear about this from the very beginning. I hold no empathy to either side once that occurs, once violence, once destruction, once any of that occurs. You lose me. I'm no longer on your side. Not that I was on anyone's side to begin with, but I'm damn sure not on your side if that's where you're going. So, I see all these people and they're saying, you know, you're cool with these protests, but you're not cool with those. Well, you were cool with those protests. Why aren't you cool with these? Well, because they were fighting for civil justice and social inequity what you got to realize is that these people believe they were, not the people who were obviously storming the building, but before that, the mass crowd of protesters believed they were doing what was right for the sake of this country. They probably believed they were being patriotic. And out of the, sake of argument, let's call it 50,000 protesters in the Capitol building, maybe 1,000 actually broke in and were acting a fool. So, even the majority of that group wasn't okay with the protest. Nobody was okay with this. This is what I'm not understanding. Nobody was justifying this. Even Donald Trump came out and said, guys, this isn't what I was talking about. But what you're telling me is, if this were Black Lives Matter protesting at the Capitol, it would be different. Yeah, you're damn right it would be different. But not the way you're implying. They would be celebrated. They would be immortalized. They'd be freaking rock stars. And I'm sorry, but it wasn't that long ago. I'm old enough to remember just a few short months ago when cities were literally being burned to the ground for months on end. Cities that will probably never recover from the damage they suffered. And you want to tell me that it would have been so much worse if Black Lives Matter protested instead of Trump supporters? They did protest in D.C. They painted Black Lives Matter across an entire street. And you know what the officials of that city did? They named the street after Black Lives Matter. You, in fact, got arrested if you tried to paint over the Black Lives Matter. So, damn that. I'm over it. You know, I'm so frustrated. It's so sickening how wide the gap has become between right and left, between liberals, conservatives, between whoever you voted for. There is no common ground anymore. There's no common values. I've literally had someone look me dead in the eyes and say, those riots over the summer were okay because of what they were writing about. But these were not because of what they were writing about. And it's like, but what if someone believes these were okay because of what they were writing about and thought you were wrong because what you were writing about or what they were writing about? You got to look at this apples to apples. It's the same exact thing. It is people behaving poorly, acting irrationally, but I believe for the most part, they had the right intentions, at least for what they believed was right. Now, again, I don't support any of it. I am not on the side of any of it. I don't think any of it's okay. But the people involved believed they were doing what was right. And I don't understand how out of one side of your mouth you can condone this and condemn this and not realize it's the exact same thing. The only difference is Black Lives Matter protests affected innocent businesses, innocent lives, people just trying to protect their own private property. And the Capitol protests involve people taking their issues directly to the source of whom they're angry at. I don't know. If you're gonna do it, well, I mean, are we splitting hairs here? I don't know. I'm ranting. Anyways, tune in for another episode of Across the Aisle, coming at you soon. Check us out. We are now officially on Anchor and Spotify. We're coming soon to Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and every other streaming service you could think of. Yeah, thanks for listening. Chaz, if you got a rebuttal, fire it at me, brother. Thank you. Have a good night.